All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're still having a few small technical difficulties with Alak Zenkar Rinpoche's video, but I'm sure we'll figure that out soon. So just before we begin, I would like to just have us all take a moment of silence and reflection in solidarity with all of those suffering around the world in this difficult and strange time, whether that's from the fires and smoke, or coronavirus, or oppression. Thank you very much. My name is Marcus Perman, and I'm the Executive Director of Tsadra Foundation, where I've worked for almost 12 years now. On behalf of the whole Tsadra team, I'd like to welcome you all to the Celebrating Buddha Nature event. Thank you for being here on this auspicious day. Thank you especially to Alex Zenkar Rinpoche and Acharya Lama Tempa Geltsen and all of you who are joining us from Asia, where it is the middle of the night. Welcome to our special guest speakers, Thupten Jinpa, Shenpen Hookham, Karl Brunnholzl, and Alex Gardner, who likewise join us from all over the world. It looks like we're reaching max capacity for Zoom, so I hope everyone else can join us on Facebook Live now. So I'm very excited about this event because it celebrates the culmination of many years of work by a dedicated team, but more importantly, it is representative of what we try to do with all our projects at Tsadra Foundation, which is to collaborate with people from different traditions and approaches, both academic and traditional, inviting them to the same table and providing a safe space for discussion and sharing of ideas. Tsadra Foundation began 20 years ago in New York City with Eric Columbell and his wife Andrea and Drupkyu Anthony Chapman, hoping to contribute to the combined study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism in the West through grant giving, at first especially for translation and publication of Tibetan texts into English and French. The goal was and continues to be the creation of resources for people who genuinely want to go deeply into the authentic study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism. Over the past 20 years, the organization has grown and developed many other programs and grants, including Tibetan publications, grants for 3-year retreat, grants for Tsadra study in Asia, conferences and meetings for translators and scholars, as well as developing various digital resources to support Tibetan translators in the study of Dharma. With this event, we are continuing our ongoing mission to bridge communities and bring together Buddhist practitioners, scholars, translators, lineage holders, monastics, and non-monastics to further the balanced and nuanced study and practice of all Tibetan Buddhist traditions. I would now like to welcome the newest recipient of Tsadra Foundation's Writer in Digital Residence Grant for Buddha Nature Studies, Lopan Dr. Karma Phuntsho, who will be our host today. Karma Phuntsho is one of Bhutan's leading intellectuals and completed both monastic training in the Tibetan traditions as well as a doctorate at Oxford. He is the founder and president of Loden Foundation in Bhutan, and his work is well known across the Himalayas and in Buddhist studies circles around the world. His books include Mipam's Dialectic and the Debates on Emptiness, the autobiography of Terten Pema Lingpa, and the history of Bhutan, and he is a regular contributor to news outlets on Bhutan and Buddhist culture. We're very pleased that he has chosen to work with us in the digital medium to create a multimedia resource hub for scripture, scholarship, and teachings on Tathagata, which we will officially launch today. So please welcome Karma Phuntsho, who joins us from Thimphu in Bhutan.
Kuzu Zangpo Tashidele and greetings from Thimphu. It's absolutely exciting to see so many new and old friends on screen, and also know that there are many friends watching live, although I can't see them. In the sutra requested by Gagana Ganja, the Buddha miraculously creates in empty space an amazing venue for his sermon called the Great Gathering. At that moment, the Bodhisattva Gaganaganja, space treasury, with a very large retinue, arrives from a distant Buddha realm to receive teachings from Shakyamuni. They bring along with them many exotic flowers from their realm and cover the venue with the flowers. The disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni, who have never seen such flowers or smelt their fragrance, thoroughly amazed by the unprecedented experience, ask the Buddha where the flowers came from. Buddha Shakyamuni explains that such an amazing occurrence is due to the powers of Bodhisattva Gaganaganja, who then descends from the clouds in order to pay homage to Shakyamuni and convey the greetings from the Buddha of his own world. Such accounts of astral travel and travel across time and space and stories of convening Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are from different worlds form a recurring theme in the Mahayana teachings in general and the Buddha Nature Sutras in particular. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can see and hear each other and attend sermons at the click of their thoughts, as it were. With powers currently available to us, this virtual conference is perhaps the closest we can get to such wondrous spiritual conventions. Although we don't possess abilities for astral travel or physically descend from the cloud with exotic flowers, this wonderful meeting in cyberspace, through harnessing the power of technology, riding invisible Wi-Fi waves and downloading visions and sounds from the digital cloud at the click of a mouse, is akin to such sacred gatherings one finds in Mahayana Sutras. So thus it's with great joy that I take this opportunity to host and moderate this session. And I would like to welcome each one of you, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, aspiring Bodhisattvas, Dharma masters, Dharma brothers, sisters, seekers of meaning and purpose in life from different continents, to this meeting, to this inauguration of the gateway, as I call it, into the heart of the Tathagatas, the Buddha Nature website. So we have among us Alak Zenkar Rinpoche, a true Bodhisattva master of our time, although at the moment they're struggling to get online from Hong Kong. And then Geshe Thupten Jinpa, Dr. Karl Brunnholzl, Lama Shenpen Hookham, Dr. Alex Gardner, and many other doyens of Mahayana Buddhism and Buddha Nature studies. Although we are deprived of the Buddha to deliver a discourse called the Great Gathering, we are here indeed a great gathering among ourselves, living in this most exciting as well as challenging century of our era. Our time, much more than the days of the Buddha, is in critical need of the message of Buddha Nature, the message of innate goodness and natural kindness that we have come together to celebrate today. Our situation calls for greater awareness and actualization of Buddha Nature. The world is rife with serious disregard for environment and non-human forms of life, despite our knowledge of the intricate interdependence of all life. It's rife with parochialism and insularity, although we know how deeply connected all nations and people are, that a virus can reach all corners of the world in a matter of weeks. It is rife with egocentricity in spite of the long-term benefit we know we gain from empathy, compassion, and altruism, and with supremacism and superciliousness against the fact that we are all equal. It's ironic, in fact, tragic, that even 2 millennia after the message of innate Buddha nature was first propagated, some human lives matter is still a major issue in our societies. Yet the COVID-19 pandemic has also been a test of human nature and has duly revealed numerous expressions of human goodness, particularly in the compassionate actions of the frontline workers. So at such times, it's important that we enhance the study and practice of something so beautiful, profound, and promising as Buddha nature, and reinforce our conviction in our innate goodness and the fundamental equality and purity of all life. So it's a great pleasure for me to kick off this session, to kick off today's proceedings with a video message from His Holiness the 17th Gelwa Karmapa, highlighting the importance of Buddha nature studies.
Namale samadrishile Tari Tsadra Foundation ki gyabgyo tam roram gwalia azu ta dishin ningbu gwalia daji simju dang dana sinki lobjong siaki ta dinde ki chagya misen diji sasu nam telia ning tabane gajo dang an ji di ji chagya sasu nangen gen zhe changma la an zhi deli shua dang al mixe do zara tip so be ki so mi yang zo lia ane ga tu xie shua da la ba do azu zara tip so be ki uchi Eric la yang anda mixe ge tu xie na do shua yin da ji dang chang mi qian xi bu shi 즉 디신인뷰 과리아 다지 디신인뷰 과다 라바도 아니 규라미 덴주 과디 아니 가서 다지 팀상 믹스에도 안들려야지 역시 칭에 마루 주요하네 데 마루 주고 이금센디 초직내 당 아주지 별이야 우마네 안다지 규라메 덴주디 나는 콜로타메게 지세직 덴주 다지 가서 차창쉐르지 당 안다지 체도르지 덴지 문진 차바좀 마세베게 안지 개규게 나데 나로리 미냥 안다다지 티버 침뷰기 춥달이야다 남규 우스미니 지지 야와치기 어봐 안 디토리아 단동 지 주다 숨버스는 장도 안다지 디신이 뭐마에 주다 사지 다지 뭐마 야래야 총회가 자도 사르지 다디 주제기 된주로 사는 장도 다지 주제기 방다르 치쉐디 규라미 된주디 사대야지都是用的好的等于民主上地军生的呢안다지 규라미 덴주에 땅 아주 별이야 안지 우마 현동랑동기 강게 덴주에서 대삼기 지가르다 삼단단디 우면 나로리아 지 가르양지 현동랑동기 야와체데 좀 마세베 텔레파 게체 우스미레 계획이야 주다 신다지 인버지리아 지 상동하지 다대한 미세르 차대도 안에 미세도 다 거유버 차츠메이미나 안다디 미세들 저 차대야지 대한 아주 기타 귤라메 덴주에디 안에 미지베기 ane 최대한 있으면 니야 버려서지 당 아주 지들지 양 루주 카시나도 시앙디도 와. 다 진짜게 토안에 ane 미지바는 저 차대 여러라. 양 다나시 미지베게다 일을 미제비 최고 디 ane 별이야 냠네. 다 별이야. 냠네 나베 겁이야. 냠네 난다 민자 나가 숨을 중요해 소리지. 직디 ane sabse nga yu uma kasha sabse nga yu uma zedu de nyamne chaji da ane nibadi saban doy uma zedu de nyamne chaji da subadi ane semjam namjun begi daji nyamne zedu de kasha dawa zedu de nyamne na de ji naga sumru chungye bja dadi sabse nga yu uma zedu de nyamne na de dang 사바 도이 우마자도 가르에 되는 냠레나디 에네 마미 yap세네 마르베신도 귀네 에네 사버도 타부르미 시qab리야 에네 사바 도이 우마자도 되아디 슈쳔부르 지나체 따지 아주 넘기 놀루기 차선세아디 어다디 바지 콩도서루지기 다지 덴주 소루지 다다디 가쇼에 규라메 덴주디 차리 여브레 안대야는 규 근데 hinji gebe dojin zebe ane da shungji ge naro le ya da di ngo pori de chimba da minchage chimba saadi da dulug uma de ya gogo haruchi dulug uma sana da dulug chasen de ya gogo haruchi da di chati ore 진짜 dinje ge thwane 지 규라메 댄저 되다 안 하버도 다지 디신님 뷰기 추다스난 자도 야나지 다 현동사의 조직네 다디지 양지 게저티 리용就是양 현동랑 동기 디기 저버티난 조den게 지도现在眼里啊나랑 외에 삼당비나 지 디신님 보마 추다스 라베미나 데지 디 타니에데 렘버르 좀 용해 삼버르 들 정도 다 강다냐 다지 그 유치원 세비네 미세 다지 디차디요 안 미스 디나는 이제 감상 외에 세비는 다지 가만 무슨 그런 정도지 다베지 별이야지 현동기 다와 저 통마 신 지 용자를 바지 캬베 난게 게 직차디 여버를 삼정도 안 다는 신 까마버 좀 셔라게 소야 안 현동리야 아 가서 통한 전부 난데기 차디 어래 안 미규도 지르 지민다 주파지 조 다와랑 동나 디다지 게라르 첨부를 해야 돼 이네 미세도 양지 현동 고려야지 대주 현동 수시를 써 봐. 진짜 재난도 와. 다들 인도산에 당에 저와래야 다리 이제 링디 지역 디토네 아주 지 표규 난된 점도 마세베 개규 난된 토리미네 지 디신이 뭐마에 기타죽당 안 미세도 안 규라메기 denju kolia 심주 가데여비미나 디주 상월로 평균 아주 지 표규 난데는 개규 난데 평균직 질이야 지 베레 채토야지 균련 채토야지 안 다른 신기한 지계의 경환된 제게 양 가서 팅두기 심주가 탑란 배제네 양 심주 나샤부터 데다 아 믹세도 유라메 denju 정보보디 수임이 라서바 다 안다나 신기 규라메기 덴주디 다지 tinsa 야베양 토고요아레 안다나 신기 규릉아쉐르 티기 신다돈 규릉아쉐 다다 예데부티 바지 게이디 차데면로 안다나 비 다나 규라 통제라서 왕부 제비 디게 딜려야지 심주 샘지 가르지 챈데요 아르지 디토라 이민다지 아주다 표균한데 개균한데 안다나신 팀류기 엔 심주기 탑랑로 서버 배제 당한세네 엔 아주기 다간다 디신이 뭐마에 더줍틀이야 리게 사바지 표투야지 당 에너지 로고 사바지 채토야지 드리지기 저와도 민도 첨부여 아 드리 두산에 이제 참여기 다리 지 디더비기 가르다지 차와 튜닝데베 차와 라부치지 우주 나무텔이야 아는 거랑원에 니 답하는 가버 중수야지다 디지 차와 라부치분디 아니 기왕 바제 매베 토안에 루토야기 민두샤이 도잖아.
So our deepest gratitude to His Holiness for his heartfelt prayers and blessings, and the very succinct account of Buddha nature as a significant topic, beaconing us to transcend our regular structures of fitting it into known categories and to ask bold new questions. The message also sets a very good comprehensive ground for further discussions and insights from the experts we have. So now we will invite the speakers, but before that, I would like to remind the audience that you can send questions via Zoom Q&A field and Facebook comment section, and questions will be curated and answered during the question and answer session after all the speakers have shared their wisdom. Marcus and I will read out the questions and have the speakers respond to them. Among our speakers, I would like to now invite Dr. Karl Brunnholzl, one of the most prolific translators of Tibetan texts into English and an eminent scholar on the works of Maitreya. Originally a physician, Dr. Brunnholzl completed higher Buddhist training at Kamala Shila Institute and also studied Tibetology, Buddhology, and Sanskrit at Hamburg University. He served as a translator and Buddhist teacher since 1989 and authored several books on Buddhism, including When Clouds Part, his masterpiece on Buddha nature, and the translation of Mahayana Samgraha, which won the Geshe Foundation Prize for Outstanding Buddhist Translation. So can I invite Dr. Brunnholzl?
Thank you. Welcome everybody to this wonderful event in cyberspace. I'm supposed to talk a little bit about Buddha nature teachings in India, which is of course, you know, easy done in 10 minutes because there's not much to say. But when we look at the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, there's different lists in the Tibetan works about which are Buddha nature sutras, 5, 10, 20 and more sutras. But actually when you look at which sutras really talk about Buddha nature, not just mentioning the word, then there's 8 Buddha nature sutras. Of course, very well known, the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, the Srimala Devi Sutra, the Angulimaliya Sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, Mahaberi Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, the Ganavyuha Sutra, and then the Anunatva Purnatva Nirdesha Parivarta, which is only available in Chinese. So these are the main sutra sources. Then in terms of the treatises of Indian masters, according to Gyalo Tsawa's Buddha Nature Commentary, he says there's 4 main ways of explaining Tathagata Garbha in Indian texts. So the first one is, not surprisingly, Buddha nature is emptiness, plain and simple, which you find in the many Madhyamika texts, starting with Bhaviveka in his Tarkajvala, where he says the expression possessing Buddha nature is used because emptiness, signlessness, wishlessness, and so on exist in the mind streams of all sentient beings. But it is not something like a permanent and all-pervasive self. So he makes it very clear that Buddha nature is not some super self or some Atman, and it is basically the 3 doors of liberation in the mind stream of all sentient beings. Others who equate Buddha nature with emptiness, Madhyamika masters such as Kamala Shila, and he uses the interesting term Tathagata Nairatmya Garbha. So not just Tathagata Garbha, but that term stems actually from the Lankavatara Sutra. It means something like the Buddha nature that is selflessness, or the selfless nature of a Buddha. So he explains Buddha nature as being the Dhammadhatu characterized by the 2 types of no self. And in this, he's followed by later Madhyamikas. Then Chandrakirti doesn't really talk explicitly about Buddha nature, but he refutes the alaya consciousness as being a definitive teaching. And then among Yogacaras, there's 2 groups in India. The very well-known early Yogacaras, Sangha, Vasubandhu, Stiramati, Asvabhava, they basically say exactly the same as the Madhyamikas. Like they all say, if they ever talk about Buddha nature, which is very rare, that it is nothing other than suchness defined as the 2 types of no self. So it seems that all of these Indian masters try to stay far away from anything that sounded like some Atman, as in the non-Buddhist Indian schools. So that they were all very clear, it's two types of no self. Then the second way of interpreting Buddha nature in India is as the luminous nature of the mind, or the basic element of awareness. And so there's a second group of Yogacaras who did that, which are hardly known outside of China, like not in India much, and definitely not in Tibet. So those all went to China, interestingly. So it seems the Yogacaras who said Buddha nature is two types of no self, they all stayed in India, and all the others who said it is the luminous nature of the mind, they went to China. So those include people like Paramartha, Gunabhadra, Ratnamati, Bodhiruchi, and so on, who taught Buddha nature teachings extensively in China. Obviously, luminous nature of the mind is also taught in Maitreya's Uttara Tantra, and to some extent in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. And it is also taught in Nagarjuna's Dharmadhatu Stava. There are some Prajnaparamita commentaries, interestingly, two Brihatikas and then another one, Amnaya Anusarini, which also speak about Buddha nature when commenting on the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And there's two Heart Sutra commentaries by Mahajana and Prarshastrasena, which also interpret the Heart Sutra in terms of Buddha nature. Then among late Yogacaras, there's Jana Srimitra and Ratnakara Shanti. They both talk about Buddha nature in quite a lot of detail in terms of being luminosity, non-dual self-awareness. Then the third way of interpreting Buddha nature is as the Alaya consciousness, which is found in the Lankavatara Sutra and the Ganavyuha Sutra, and also in some of Paramartha's work, the Indian master who went to China, in his free translations of the Mahayana Samgraha Bhashya and the Awakening of the Mahayana Faith. And then the fourth way of interpreting Buddha nature in India is as Buddha nature is sentient beings. So there's a quote in the Hevacha Tantra, for example, that all sentient beings are Buddhas, but obscured by adventitious stains. When these are removed, then sentient beings are Buddhas. And the Uttara Tantra itself also teaches Buddha nature by three names: sentient beings, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So one could add a fifth way of interpreting Buddha nature, which is connected to the tradition of Maitripa, who is credited in the Tibetan tradition as having rediscovered the Uttara Tantra. But in his own teachings, the Uttara Tantra is only quoted twice, and it's also not really explained anywhere. But one of his students, Vajrapani, in one of his texts, which is called the Guru Parampara Kramopadesha, he interprets the famous verse from the Uttara Tantra that there's nothing to be added and nothing to be removed from both a Madhyamika and a Mahamudra way. So he links Buddha nature teachings here in a very clear way to Mahamudra, including practice instructions, which is quite interesting. So he says Mahamudra, Buddha nature, is the unity of luminosity and emptiness. Then finally, when we come to the Uttara Tantra itself, the Uttara Tantra itself teaches Buddha nature in three ways: as Dharmakaya, as suchness, and as the Gotra. And Gyalotsava says it also teaches a fourth general characteristic, which is non-conceptuality. And in addition, the Uttara Tantra calls Buddha nature Dhatu, the basic element. It also speaks of Buddha nature as suchness, stained suchness when it is obscured, and stainless suchness. And in addition, it speaks of the qualities of awareness, or of the basic element, and also the enlightened activity. So these are also intrinsic parts of Buddha nature that make up the last four Vajra points: stained suchness, Buddha nature when obscured, stainless suchness when it is unobscured, or called Buddhahood, and then the qualities of that Buddhahood and the activity. So this also highlights that Buddha nature is not a static thing sitting somewhere, but it's active all the time for the benefit of sentient beings. So I didn't check the time, honestly, but I think this is pretty much what I have to say at this point in the time that I was allotted. So thank you. I'm sure there was too many texts, too many names, but this is just a brief overview of Buddha nature teachings in India. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Brunnholzl. It's fascinating to hear about the 5 different types of understanding Buddha nature. Now, I would like to invite Geshe Dr. Thupten Jinpa. Geshe-la hardly needs any introduction among Tibetan and Buddhist circles. Besides finishing his Haram Geshe degree from Sharsey College of Kanden Monastery, he has received a BA and PhD from Cambridge University and has been a principal English translator to His Holiness the Dalai Lama since 1985. He is the founder and president of Institute of Tibetan Classics and a member of Mind and Life Institute and visiting research scholar at Stanford Institute for Neuroinnovation and Translational Neurosciences. He has written, translated, and edited many books, including Self-Reality and Reason in Tibetan Thought, Tsongkhapa's Quest for Middle Way, and edited a volume of Tibetan writings on Buddha nature, Deshik Ningpo Riki Shukor. So over to you, Geshe-la.
Thank you. Thank you, Lavella. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Tsadra Foundation for initiating this project. And also, I would like to congratulate Lama Phuntsho for really taking on this major challenge of creating such an educational online resource. And also, I would like to express my deep gratitude to His Holiness Karmapa for really gracing this special event, the official launch of this project. You know, Karl has really made my job easy because he really kind of paved the way because the Tibetan tradition really sees itself as a continuation of the Indian tradition, Indian Buddhist tradition. And also all the major Tibetan traditions see themselves as custodians of the Indian tradition. So, you know, Karl paving the way really made my job much easier. Also, I was deeply touched by Karmapa's somewhat provocative suggestion that we as a Tibetan scholars really move beyond the fixed boundaries of doxographical approach of Shendong versus Rangtong category of trying to understand the literature and teachings on Buddha nature. And in fact, that's the sentiment I have shared for a long time. And in our Library of Tibetan Classics series, one of the reasons why I felt the need to have a specific volume just on the teachings on Buddha nature, that was an important part of my motivation for creating that volume. Now, in Tibet, of course, some understanding of the concept of Gotra, some kind of, you know, the Buddha lineage or Sanghya Rig, that is goes all the way back to the kind of perfection of wisdom, Pachin literature. So, and then there we see among writings of Asanga and Vasubandhu and as well as Haribhatra and Vimukti Sena. So this whole Pachin literature became a major area of focus in the 11th century, 10th, 11th century. And of course, when it comes to scholastic traditions, the father of the Tibetan scholastic traditions really Ngok Losawol Desharap. And Ngok, in addition to translating the Pachin literature, he was also one of the first ones to translate the Uttara Tantra, the Gyulama. And Lozawa in his, you know, Blue Annals speak about Atisha and Nakso Lozawa actually undertaking a translation of Uttara Tantra, but they are not available now. They're not extant. And there might also have been another translation of Uttara Tantra by Zen Kaoche. We do know from Goilozawa that there was a special teaching lineage on Uttara Tantra that was different from Goilozawa's teaching. But again, we don't have, any specific translation of that. The canonical version of the translation is by Goilozawa. And Ngok, like on many topics that he worked on, one of the geniuses of Ngok was to really create summaries and succinct summaries of these key texts. And in some cases, he would even write commentaries. So on Uttara Tantra, his Thupten, the summary, is a really important one. Now, if you look at Ngok's reading of Buddha nature, he really doesn't seem to move that further away from the Indian traditions that really identify Buddha nature with emptiness that Karl spoke about. And he stays quite close to the way in which someone like Haribhatra would read the concept of Buddha nature, particularly the abiding nature, the Rangshin Generic. And so it's essentially the emptiness of the mind of a sentient being that is tainted. That really is a Tijeges. So that was basically, and I think Ngok did appreciate the specific unique language that we find in the Tathagata Garba, the Buddha nature literature, some of which are very poetic, very beautiful, but also if you read them literally from Ngok and Madhyamaka thinkers' point of view, somewhat problematic, because there's language like, eternal permanence, great self, Dachenpo, and all of this. So, and Ngok, if you read the Ngok's summary of Uttara Tantra, he uses the hermeneutic device of, distinguishing between an actual referential language versus metaphoric usage. So Ngwe and Tak. And so Ngok, sort of basically appreciates the uniqueness of the language of the Tathagata Garba, but he doesn't dig deeper into what they mean. So and then came Sapen. And like many important areas of Buddhist topic, Sapen is, regardless of whether one agrees with his position or not, it really is, we have to acknowledge Sapen's unique role in the history of the tradition. And Sapen in the 12th century or 13th century, he really opened up this debate, and basically he critiqued literal reading of the Buddha nature literature. He, systematically argued them to be provisional, Tangdun, and also, and his critique of Buddha nature literature is a part of a broader critique of, some versions of Mahamudra, particularly the Sutra version of Mahamudra, which Karmapa initiated. So it's part of all of that. And there is also a critique of this very important sutra known as Nagai Shige Do, Adhyajan Sutra, where there is this famous line that if you realize the nature of your mind, you're a Buddha. Sapen critiques this. So I think it's Sapen that really opened up and brought to the attention of the Tibetan scholars and thinkers and practitioners that here is a very unique set of teaching. So that's why we see in the beginning or middle of 14th century, there's a lot of activity. So you have Thupten, you have Karmapa Rangjung Doje, and you have Tolpupa Sherab Gyaltsen. Three of the most important early figures in fleshing out the uniqueness of the teaching of the Tathagata Garba. Now, Thupten stays fairly close to Sapen's approach, appreciates the uniqueness of the language, but interprets the Tathagata Garba literature as being metaphorical and provisional, and basically arguing that it is the empty nature of the mind that is the Garba, ultimately. And then you have Karmapa, you have Tolpupa Sherab Gyaltsen, who one could argue goes to the other end of the spectrum and not only argues for the definitive nature of these teachings, but in fact argues that this is the sort of the ultimate summit, culmination of all of the Buddhist teachings. And Tolpupa really reads the Tathagata Garba literature from the tantric perspective, Vajrayana perspective, to the point where he equates the term Tathagata Garbha with many key words from the very specific Vajrayana literature. And then we have Karmapa Rangjung Dorje, who wrote that beautiful text, the Geshe Thupten Jinpa. And at the end, in the colophon, or one could say in the concluding part, there is a hint where Karmapa also sees this Tathagata Garbha teachings as a very important link between the Sutra teachings and the Tantra teachings. In fact, his short treatise ends with saying, Sangye Gi Nyingbu Tenpa, Doji Tegwe Nyingbu Zoso. So this presentation of the Garbha, Buddha Garbha, which constitutes the essence of Vajrayana teaching, is concluded. So he really makes that connection. So it's in this early 14th century, we have this lot of activity, a lot of, probably I would argue, the most creative period in the Tibetan thinking with respect to, Buddha nature. Then comes Tsongkhapa. So Tsongkhapa essentially, so what one could see is we can see, on the one hand, you have people like Putten and Sapan, who is really arguing the Buddha nature teachings to be provisional. You have Ngok Lonszawa, who is arguing, who doesn't argue to be provisional, but who interprets Buddha nature in terms of emptiness of the mind. And then you have Tolpupa Sherab Gyaltsen, who's arguing in a different way. And the Karmapa Rangjung Dorje can be seen in this kind of camp. Of course, there are slight variations. I'm just being very broad. And then comes Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa is more in line with Putten, but Tsongkhapa appreciates that Tathagata Garbha literature has very important implications. And his approach to, in some sense, kind of inoculate the Garbha literature against the critique of eternalism, falling into a more eternalistic trend, is to distinguish between Takten Nyingpo and Deshe Nyingpo. So Deshe Nyingpo, Buddha nature, the teaching is definitive. But Takten Nyingpo, which is the eternal self, that is a provisional, and it's taught for a specific purpose. And with that distinction, Tsongkhapa comes up with this idea that the Deshe Nyingpo teachings are definitive, and it represents an important insight coming from the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And implicit in Tsongkhapa's writing is this idea that in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, in the Tathagata literature, there is a kind of a move towards more the subject as opposed to the object emptiness, which is in the second turning. And in this way, Tsongkhapa also appreciates how the Tathagata Garbha literature provides a link between the sutra teachings of emptiness and tantric teachings on the luminous nature of the mind, or clear light, vessel. So I think now why Tathagata Garbha is so important is because it's in the Tathagata Garbha teaching that we really begin to see some understanding of how this entire process of purification and cultivation of the great qualities of the mind takes place. Whereas if you simply look at the Madhyamaka teachings, the language is completely via negativa. It's only about elimination of the obscuration of mind and grasping. But there is little explanation of how the qualities of the Buddha, the innate goodness, compassion, and all of these becomes perfected. And the Tathagata Garbha literature seems to provide that link, that provides that explanation. And also Tathagata Garbha literature and teachings really provides the most comprehensive and cohesive explanation of the connection between the sutra teachings, where the wisdom realizing emptiness is the heart of it, connects with the teachings of the Vajrayana, particularly the highest yoga tantra. So I think Gyalpo Karmapa's, the advice to us to really expand our framework and to look at the uniqueness of the contributions of the Buddha nature teaching, which, as he pointed out, has been a major area of focus in the East Asian Buddhist traditions. But I would add to this another dimension, which is the Tibetan Vajrayana perspective. So, for example, if you look at the 7th Dalai Lama's commentary on Adya Jhana Sutra, he in fact connects the three Buddha natures, references to Buddha nature that Karl pointed out, which he actually links them in kind of a Vajrayana language. So I think so there is quite a lot of areas that needs further research. For example, who actually wrote Uttara Tantra, and all of this, and how I mean, in the end, my own sense is that there is an inherent tension between the insights and implications of teachings coming from the Maitreya lineage and the insights and teachings coming from the Nagarjunian emptiness lineage. And the Tibetan tradition, all the major traditions recognize the importance of both of these lineages, and how do you find a way to integrate them in a more comprehensive understanding that would also give an intellectual and conceptual underpinning to the validity and experience of the Vajrayana teachings. That, I think, is one area where Buddha nature literature becomes indispensable. So I'm really happy that Tsadra has really taken this initiative to open up a whole new area of scholarship. So I would encourage scholars, and I would actually like to see PhD students taking on this, because there are many important aspects that still need to be researched to make sense of how do the Nagarjunian teaching of emptiness really line up with the Tathagata Garbha teaching coming from the Maitreya lineage, and how together they can provide a robust underpinning for the Mahayana, for the Vajrayana teachings, particularly the highest yoga tantra that emphasizes the experience of luminous nature of mind. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
So thank you very, very much, Geshe, for covering the entire spectrum of understanding and interpretations of Buddha nature in Tibet in such a short span of time, and also highlighting the importance of Tathagata Garbha or Buddha nature in the Vajrayana system. And next, I would like now invite Lama Shenpen Hookham. Lama Shenpen is the founding Lama of the Awakened Heart Sangha and the principal teacher of the Living the Awakened Heart training. She has a DPhil from Oxford University, has trained for over 50 years in Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, and spent 12 years in retreat. Lama Shenpen has translated a number of Tibetan texts into English and is the author of many books, including The Buddha Within, and There's More to Dying Than Death. We have had two past speakers talk about Buddha nature in India and Tibet. Now we have Lama Shenpen talk about Buddha nature in practice. Over to you, Lama.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'm completely awestruck by the previous speakers, the erudition and the clarity with which they have presented the whole area, and compared with them, what I have to say is quite lightweight, I think. But then this is what this website is about. It's about making these teachings available not just to scholars, but to practitioners and even people new who just want to find out about Buddhism. So I'm very honoured to be asked to speak at this launch. Just let me check. I should finish at 5:15. Is that right? And I'm particularly pleased that it aims to serve everybody, including newcomers and Buddhist scholars and practitioners, and help them to become inspired and informed, and we can have informed debate about this important topic. On one hand, it's a fascinating topic from the academic point of view, which we've just been hearing, into the various scriptures and commentaries and what they have to say about it over the centuries, all the very interesting debates that have gone on. But on the other hand, and this is perhaps what my paper is more about, is its direct relevance to our lives as human beings. what is Buddha nature in our direct experience? I mean, we've got all these technical names for it, but what is it when it comes down to the practitioner's nature, or what the path means? And what does it tell us? What do these teachings tell us about what the self is, what the mind is, what life is? These are issues that everybody cares about. What do we care about most? It's ourself. So what is this self? And how does the way we understand Buddha nature or self inform our Dharma practice? So even as an initial idea, Buddhist nature can be quite life-changing. I found that as I've been teaching my students over the years, because it promises us that we don't need to despair of ourselves. We're not fundamentally bad. We're not essentially flawed. We all have, you could say we all have a heart. That's how we would say it in colloquial English, I think. We all have a heart. When you say somebody's got a good mind, well, some have good minds, some can't help not having good minds, but heart, we can all have a good heart. There's something very special about it. Something very special about the way we intuitively use the word heart that I think sometimes is a bit overlooked, especially because we tend to translate chitta as mind. And if you talk about mind a lot, people go up into their minds, which doesn't happen when you talk about sem. It doesn't quite work the same way, which is a huge problem in the translation, in the business of translating these texts. As our understanding deepens, Buddha nature becomes increasingly radical in its implications. It's not just simply something nice to cheer me up. It actually becomes quite revolutionary. And what we thought was us, me, is in fact an illusion. And what we always were is Buddhas. And when you look and you realize what Buddhas are, you think, hang on, that's beyond words. That's amazing. That's what is actually being said. And I continue to be more and more amazed as the years go by. So Buddhism can sound very nihilistic, as if it's all about no self. There is no self. There is no person. As if beings were just illusion. And people these days are only, I find with my students too, they only too ready to hate themselves and wish themselves dead. So telling them that they have no self feeds increasingly into this kind of negative thinking, that I'm not worth anything. Here we are. I'm even just an illusion. And therapies these days are increasingly using the term self with a capital S, which I'm finding very interesting. It obviously means something in English to talk about self with a capital S. Not do I believe in it or not, but what are we going to call that in which I do believe? And one name for it is self. And advocating self-leadership as vital for mental health and happiness and so on. So as Buddhists, we're going to have to be very careful how we go around talking about no self. Indeed, in our hearts, all of us Buddhists, I think, we know what makes, not only Buddhists, but everybody, what makes life meaningful is that beings matter, other people matter. They're not mere illusion, and we intuitively connect to them, interestingly, in our hearts. We say all sorts of things about our connection to other beings using heart language without any effort whatsoever to try and analyze what we mean. We just kind of meet there somehow. So Buddha teachings explore what it is that we know in our hearts, actually, and how we know it, and how that is the bodhicitta, the awakened heart, that makes our fulfillment of the bodhisattva vow possible. So any of you are listening carefully can say, hang on, this is all Shinto. What about the other, the other versions of Tathagata? That's what makes this website so important, that actually there are other versions. I'm holding forth on this one. So beings far from non-existent are already Buddhas, and so we can help them to realize that, so that because they are already Buddhas, it makes sense to make a vow to bring them all to Buddhahood, because after all, that's what they are anyway. So, it's possible. It was Karl Brunnholzl Rinpoche who first made me aware of there being two radically different ways of understanding Buddha nature. So we've talked about all these different ways of understanding Buddha nature and all these different Buddhist schools, but actually, I think you can actually categorize them as falling into two different camps, different versions of what Buddhism is actually ultimately about, which I think, you know, anybody from outside the tradition needs to be aware of. There are two versions of Buddhism out there, and they hang on two different aspects of the Buddhist teachings on emptiness and not self. So I say two different aspects of these teachings. It's not that some people teach one kind of emptiness and one kind of a not self, but when you're teaching emptiness or you're teaching not self, there's two aspects to it. Everything we conceptually grasp is conditioned and impermanent and not self-empty. So you can say this is like the snake that we mistake for a rope in the dark. So we grasp at the skandhas as self. Actually, when you look more closely, that's an illusion. So reality, which in this example is the rope, is known not by that kind of mind that is conceptually analyzing things. It is actually known by non-conceptual, non-dual awareness, and is our true nature, otherwise known as the nature of mind, or Buddha nature, or bodhicitta, or all sorts of other names in the different Buddhist traditions. And in the Tibetan tradition, this is referred to as Shentong. This is something that's been mentioned in passing by the other speakers. And this gives you a sense of what it is that's being discussed. So the rope aspect is what's there when you get rid of the snake aspect, which is ultimately false. So you could say this is other emptiness, or emptiness of other, in the sense that it's empty of anything graspable or false. In this example, the snake. So the rope has nothing to do with snakes whatsoever. It's just always been totally independent of the snake. So Khenpo Rinpoche observed that we need to realize that there is a reality we have faith in. Oh yeah, we need to realize that there is a reality we can have faith in. And if we have faith in that and we learn to recognize that, then the illusion of the snake or itself falls away by itself. And it doesn't have to be given up through a kind of some sort of effort. There's nothing to give up. There's nothing to add. There's nothing to realize that wasn't there already. So those of you who know the Ratnagotra Vibhaga will recognize that verse. So since the early days of Buddhist tradition, there's been a tension between the scholars, those who learn the formalized teachings by heart or from texts, treating them as intellectual constructs, and what you might call practitioners, yogins who practice under the guidance of a meditation master and realize the deep inner meaning of the teachings, which you could say the deep inner meaning is the rope. So you realize that rope through your connection with the meditation master, and through meditation and through faith in the teaching, that whole way of approaching the teachings. And this inner meaning is not accessible to the conceptualizing mind. As a result, two distinct versions of Buddhism have appeared throughout the Buddhist world down the ages, and you get this on every level. And, you know, I meet Buddhist practitioners, it doesn't matter what tradition they come from, but I can quickly pick up whether they are simply saying everything is changing and illusory and, you know, there's no self, or whether they're saying, you know, there's something that is there to be realized that that needs to be approached as a kind of deep truth that's beyond the grasping mind, the conceptual mind. So so that's that version of Buddhism that focuses on what's impermanent, conditioned, and changing aspect of self, the snake, if you like, and the version of Buddhism that focuses on the discovery of the rope. It doesn't say there is a snake or there isn't a snake. It just says, if you focus on the rope and you have faith in that is the rope, you have it pointed out to you and you meditate on that, actually the snake disappears by itself. So it doesn't need so much analysis. All Buddhists teach that everything that is conditioned, so this is what we all have in common, both sides, both versions, all versions of Buddhism teach that everything that is conditioned is impermanent, and clinging on to what is impermanent causes suffering. Some teach that this is all there is, and accepting this is all we can do. There's no self other than changing conditions. I often hear Westerners putting forward this view. Others teach that what is impermanent is not the self, and so must be rejected. As we seek our true self or true nature, I think you could say true self, true nature are synonymous here, which is the same as nirvana or Buddha nature. I don't think we need to get hung up about this word self, really, to be honest. It seems that there are two versions of Buddhism that have existed. These two versions have existed side by side ever since Buddhist commentarial traditions began. And we're talking here not only differences between traditions, but actually within teachers within traditions. So I think sometimes we've got all the names of different schools. I think some of them fall more independent of what their school is called. Some of the teachers fall more on the Shentong side, some more into the Langtong side, to just use the terms as a neat, quick reference to a whole cluster of ideas. It's with great pleasure that I welcome this Buddha Nature website that gives those interested in Buddhism, whether spiritual seekers, practitioners, and or scholars or translators, the opportunity to explore these two versions of Buddhism and how they explain the Tathagata teachings as found in the Mahayana Sutras and commentaries and elsewhere. Because all we Buddhists are using, all we Tibetan Buddhists are kind of using the same scriptures, but if we're coming from one version of Buddhism, we're going to interpret everything in that according to that version. And if we're coming from the other version, we're going to interpret everything according to that version. And this is actually going to affect the way the texts are translated, which is very interesting. So lots to discover, lots to discuss. So I hope it will spawn further interest and research into this pivotal aspect of the Buddhist tradition, discussing with which teachers and teachings belong to which version of Buddhism and what they're really trying to say. So it's utmost important to our time that humanity as a whole comes to an agreement as to what a human being is, what a person is, what the mind and heart, self, and even the universe and life itself is, and how, for example, it differs from what you hear bandied about, artificial intelligence. Are we going to be able to create a mind? I think not, but this is something really important. It's going to become increasingly important. If all beings, human and otherwise, are Buddha by nature, then it's not only the future of the planet that is at stake, but our capacity to help all beings realize their true nature and thereby put an end to all suffering. And if we have no faith that beings are already Buddha in any sense, then why should we value life or anything for that matter? Yet the mystery stares us in the face. If beings are already Buddhas, how come they don't realize it and suffer endlessly in samsara? It's easier to believe we have merely the potential or capacity to be Buddhas, and that gradually the right causes and conditions need to come together for us to realize that potential and develop Buddha qualities. So I wonder, should I stop there?
Yes, if you can speak for a couple more minutes if you have.
Okay. However, all that is developed or compounded is impermanent and not a refuge. So if you've got to develop the Buddha qualities, it sounds as if they're conditioned and impermanent and not a refuge. Only the Buddha, the non-compounded, non-conditioned, non-constructed, not analyzable as causes and conditions, is suitable as a refuge. So what could that be other than our Buddha nature? What could that be other than our Buddha nature, which, since it is non-compounded, is not impermanent? So our refuge and our Buddha nature are what, if you like, they're not impermanent, so they are reliable. And that means that it's not just emptiness, but it's all the qualities, as the Ratnagota Vibhaga points out. However, there is a danger that we adopt a simplistic view of Buddha nature as a concept that we can grasp and own as I believe it. I am a Buddha, which is a fragile belief and could lead to all sorts of distortions. So instead, we need to talk about how to discover it experientially in ourselves by reflection and meditation. In the Pali Sutras, it's clear that the Buddha was intent on getting us to give up all intellectual views. Again and again, you look at the Pali Sutras, he's just got this one message: give up your intellectual views, your grasping at views, and instead look directly at your true nature through meditation and mindfulness practice. He didn't teach there is a self or there is not a self. He didn't say there is no self. If you look through the Pali, you don't find any statement there's no self. In fact, he uses self quite positively, like I'm doing here. And he doesn't teach there is or there isn't any Buddha nature. He taught us to seek our true self or true nature. I think you can substitute nature and self in the way it's used in the Pali, and trust that, letting go of false views. In practice, by discovering truth, the false just falls away by itself like dark in the presence of light, one of Khenpo Rinpoche's favorite images. It's wonderful that on the website we have many Dharma teachers using Buddha nature teachings to point out our true nature and as means of developing faith and confidence in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And I hope it will lead to some really productive debate and trigger deep reflection on all sides so that Buddhism can offer to the world a significant contribution to the ongoing search for truth and meaning found in all Buddhist human societies, whether it be in the arts, the sciences or spirit traditions worldwide. So thank you from your heart. My heart, for all the effort you've put into creating this amazing website from its first conception to its present form, and for all those who will engage with it and carry its work forward. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very, very much, Lama Shenpen. It's very interesting to hear from a practitioner engaged in the society how sometimes our scholarly or scholastic understanding can become tricky, especially when it comes to psychotherapy in our times with lots of people going through stress and depression. So now as we move forward, I have the honor of inviting our guest of honor today, Zenkar Rinpoche from Hong Kong. Let's see if we can bring him on screen. And then we have had a technical glitch earlier. We couldn't hear him. I hope that is resolved. We'll try. And if the glitch is still on, then I'm afraid I'll have to call him on WeChat from my phone and then try to share the voice from here. So can you see Rinpoche on the screen?
He seems to be offline entirely now. Sorry about that.
Okay, so if that is the case, what we shall do then, I think is we will, hopefully Rinpoche will come on. There has been this persistent problem. We will start the chant, the praise to Buddha nature, and then as and when Rinpoche is back on, we will have him bless the website and also say some words. So I will introduce him as and when he comes on. And right now, we'll now move to chant the prayer. I will share my screen and you can join the chants, although you'll still be muted. The text in blue are instructions and the text in black are to be chanted. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen well. Thank you.
So let's start chanting the praise to Buddha nature. Let's begin by chanting the verse for taking refuge and generating bodhisattva. Sangye Shodan Sojo Lai Janjo Bardu Dajaevje Rajen Dene Rabdujre Janjo Semni Gebarai Sangye Shodan Sojo Lai Janjo Bardu Dajaevje Rajen Dene Rabdujre Janjo Semni Gebarai. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. In order to achieve the purpose of oneself and others, I generate the altruistic thought of bodhisattva. Om Hum Hang Shai Jizun Lama Dambe Javla Gyube Chazi Ganji Gunzoi Chenaim Gunge Dune Tongshen Dabe Je Chenye Dunae Ranjin Nyume Ranjin Yuze Dejenye Keme Game Pojro Mejen Tsemae Melae Trebae Yume Meme Dadan Dewan Deje Nimbo La Chai Ganshi Jimen Duma Yamen Taba Mayen Cheba Me Tomba Maye Miton Mila Deme Zumba Maye Kanzai Meje Chechai Meje Dame Dagi Mebe Yen Samo Tonye Nyevrai Shiva Deshi Nimbo La Chai Kanshi Tenjin Devrai Jue Pumbo Mejin Kamchai Me Geshe Mejin Dembai Melai Sunwai Mejin Zimbai Kamsoi Mejin Zizoi Melai Dizoi Chenai Damje Dungile Kunjoi Lamdai Yishe Mebai Kelai Chatzeroi Kene Namyae Namgae Tabo Juroe Mechire Dijinye Kundoi Meje Semda Yedai Chenam Kene Sema Mebe Yinlai Pabe Chenam Mali Judai Kamla Di Ledo Kene Jive Injai Lai Papai Namge Sozo Ranri Yije Dambe Chul Kene Denaen Dembai Nila Jinje Lodan Jeven Emhai Kene Yandai Dalai Tadan Dele Uman Kene Nyamon Jene Jile Nyanyen Debe Injan Ranjie Jurmen Dewai Jelai Kene Chujin Gede Kene Jajai Chenpo Nilai Deji Kene Tongjen Kene Chujin Gede Ledo Jaja Chenpo Nijan Jewai Kingi Yumcho Nile Shera Parule Chima Mijuroi Miche Miche Cherdan Sison Jibai Nigi Chere Kene Doje Senpai Cholai Ninje Tongye Hermes Kene Gien Doje Chola Dijin Dabdai Sheraed Dene Erme Ronyaim Deje Kene Decho Kolon Kuji Erme Ronyaim Jedain Dedon Erme Zonjole Kene Kalai Chagrai Cholai Ponyai Kingi Sawai Jewai Kingi Begun Dule Kene Sawai Dubai Janjoi Semda Yijob Jinai Kene Ladan Ajan Sanje Kingi Rimai Nile Sanje Kunda Nyambrai Inda Ije Lenje Gele Kene Lenje Gejuroi Dungile Sunge Dungile Jile Kene Dungile Jije Jan Nejoi Kingi Tardo Nile Jindo Nejoi Jojan Kene Kadrai Kunlai Chabjan Chenam Kingi Gemai Lai Kene Chigi Kindo Laja Namga Jindo Ron Chenam Kingi Nezo Sunjang Chenam Kingi Tadoido Toparai Kajen Nambrai Chega Sami Chabai Kelai Du Chabjoy Kelai Dije Tsuge Lenje Samya Duje Nae Sunam Zoje Nyewarai Duje Shenda Layang Dunbai Dang Maye Zije Gombrai Jive Sunam Labje Mejuz Dije Gunge Diden Zojin Tsujin Gomne Dunbarai Cho. Now, it seems like Rinpoche is online. We can see Rinpoche. I don't know if we can hear Rinpoche well. Rinpoche, can you say something to see if We can hear you. It looks like Rinpoche's sound is off, so please forgive us. I'm going to call him on phone and get his voice via my phone. Rinpoche, can you hear the phone? Can you pick up the phone? Rinpoche, kabaji suna WeChat nala sungro Rinpoche, sunge goyimdo. Yeah, something is wrong. So sorry again, which it didn't connect on. Or Rinpoche. I don't know if the rest can hear well, but I will ask Rinpoche to read from the next verse. Lasso Rinpoche dinan denaro. Dangbo di demba di naro Rinpoche, demba chasa di dine Rinpoche sunaro. La re Rinpoche.
Namo Geshe Thupten Jinpa Simni Geshe Thupten Rapti Noa Nada Manu Sargi Yus Nana Nodman Semche Kaya Me Jingshi Tokyu Navi Dune Mena Tuji Wangi Na Semjen Dona Gongmi Phuntsho Yiti Fujian should be Niduru Gyalwa Kurji Malu Yaksu So Jumden Dirne Jumbalap So, Galvar dance. Daki Chuyun Jimmy Yang Denit Dunu Jukso Om Banzer Samaya Za Om Banzer Samaya Om Banzer Samaya Tam Banzer Samaya Ho Da yigim dongdi.
That ending na chisuna na Rinpoche.
Oh, laso. Omi dharma hitu prabhava hitu nekhan tathanga to ayawati nekhan
Tanza yunero da evam
bade ma karma na.
So lemasum sunaro Rinpoche.
Oh, laso. Omi dharma hitu prabhava hitu nekhan tathanga to ayawati nekhan zayon niroda evam bade ma karma na. Dharma hitu parbawa hitu dekhan tathan gata ayawati dekhan zayo niroda evam bati mahai karma na so
So tuji chena Rinpoche da dangbo nye konzola motechi shugi Rinpoche di shula Rinpoche sunshe naro. So our guest of honor today, Alak Zenkar Rinpoche, as most of you may know, is an eminent Nyingma master one of the world's leading scholarly lamas with a breadth of knowledge rarely matched. He was a board member of Tibetan Buddhist Resource Center and also of China Association for Preservation and Development of Tibetan Culture. He was also a senior research scholar at Columbia University and visiting scholar at University of Virginia. Rinpoche has authored numerous papers and prefaces to books and received many awards. But most importantly, Rinpoche heads the Peltsek Tibetan Rare Texts Research Center, through which he has rescued and reproduced thousands of important and rare Tibetan texts, including many on Buddha nature. A self-effacing Mahapandita, a hidden yogi, and a very elusive grandmaster with unparalleled contribution to Tibetan literary culture and education. There's no way I can do justice to his works in a short introduction. So, friends, ladies and gentlemen, this is Alak Zenkar Rinpoche, who you see on the screen finally. I would like to ask Rinpoche to say a few words to bless the website. That's what Rinpoche, that's Sunara.
That's all. Tangi Mangborang Kang Shuji Mindu, Tato ni Tering Shuji de Kari, Shuna, some developers Ingo, they are the Semshin Tamjik Jula, Yene Yodex. Any Papa Tamjik. Pugla, you magic. That is the Tumba Tuji Jenny Zone. Do that dagger, Parla, Jupa, Ha, Ga, Yin, Ho, Jupa Mandrava, Tamji, He, Chocolate. Nerva Hajang Mangbo, Yuri, that be Tanden Nula, Kawan number Tamjek, give us song, Nala Juji Ham Indula, me Jutia, and then Tandani, then the Jua, Yong the gallery, Tena. That there should be Hingo Day, Semjin Tamjet, Pavanam, Tubilla, you are a day. Then around Sogi, they you bet the go to Kioma. Then that day, could you happy? Then Sagi Kanying Lama Shenpen Namgi Deni Rarang Jusur Shesur Mindra Vala Deni Tamjik Nevshit Tajik Ndrala Namin Azo Yobachi Song de Yori Tati Tamji de Naran to Higona Ahoy. Yinayang Tanita de Nama Ranglu Juniba in the Gap they give Zoxenla Jasa Chini Tati Jasa de they give Zoxenga Sering Jung Vesa Della Tanita Hembo Pematsawan Juajigore Degi Undune Domsum Namni Tani Degi Tanita Neke Hembo Yunga Neke Neti Tone Hokion Raji Ruby Kuye That is Hoshon Zuji Della that then Karambo Chigi Tanita Tango Zopa Chimbu Ihi Izu Baby Cup the knee. The knee Kongatella Repshit Mambo Nang. The knee thing Repshit de Soyang. The knee Dangara to Ige Tokne de Kerkabu. The knee Nami, the knee Nala Lula Lejuari. That being on the carriage, then Zopa Chimbo Izu David Cups the name. The knee that did the need the dishes mingo de Kite Ndole Ndoganala, the need the dishes mingo in the song you're young Yigi Kausik in Nangla Zumada, Chibi, Rip in the young, the need the song you're the Ndole, Zuchi, David. That not only give the toy on you, Yoga Gaps, the knee, see, the knee, some don't keep it David. Tani ta Obayoka the Techo with Gaps young Ducky de Konai. The young Tani the Hong Tani ta Mahayoka Gaps around him. Then I knew you got the cups. Then you need to maybe same. And I think you got the cups. Music between that the need the sense of it. That counter Jenna, it comes in the Teso Nani, then in the song you are in. That is so the Pesha Teso Nana, then in the Abu, then in the Signa. At that time, the Nabjunkin Tamche, Haleba, then in the Yunden Chimbota. At the dealer, Chadu. Haleba Yunkin to the Reza. Then the use of the Delany, then it Sanji like Kakat. Forget how much you're going to say to your body. Oh, yeah, that's so. Then it's the end actually. That dating you did the Halam Dam Sunbastic Day.
So, Rinpoche, thank you very, very much. I think I will very briefly translate or interpret what Rinpoche has shared. Oops, hold on, let me put my... So Rinpoche began by saying that he has not much to share, but he mentioned how the Buddha nature teachings have come down from the Buddha. Of course, that the Buddha nature is in the minds of all the sentient beings and the enlightened beings, and that these teachings have come down from the Buddha through different lineages, including the Sakya, Geluk, Nyingma Kagyu traditions of Tibet, and that there are so many commentaries and works on Buddha nature that he need not elaborate here. What he would like to share here is that Buddha nature remains in the minds of all the sentient beings, but we don't realize it. And in order to help us realize this, there are many methods and strategies put in place through these different traditions. And the traditions have all many treatises and commentaries written and the former speakers have already shared about this breadth and the depth of these studies. What Rinpoche would like to share is a personal story from when he was 12 years old, studying in Dzogchen Tsadra in Dege. He was in a place called Tsiringjong, studying under an abbot called Pema Tsewang. And the abbot Pema Tsewang was teaching Domsum Namnye, the text on 3 vows by Ngari Penchen Pema Wangel. And he was using the commentary by Khenpo Yönten Gyatso. And while explaining that text, particularly the first line of the text, Dzogpa Chenpo Yishichi Zuk, that Dzogpa Chenpo, or great perfection, is the embodiment or epitome of pristine wisdom. The Khenpo has made Rinpoche memorize a text, a commentary on this line, and that sort of encapsulates the understanding of Buddha nature. That Buddha nature in the Sutra tradition is known as the suchness with defilement, and that the Buddha nature is known as the suchness of the self in the Kriya Tantra tradition, that it is known as the sphere, the Vajra sphere, free from extremes in the Yoga Tantra, that it is called by the name self-aware bodhicitta in the Mahayoga Tantras, and that it's called by the name non-duality of sphere and pristine wisdom in the Anuyoga Tantras, and by the term great indestructible essence, Mishikpi Thikle Che, in Ati-yoga tradition. So Rinpoche basically wants to underscore this point that the Buddha nature is very central to all the Buddhist traditions. So with that, now I would like to ask Marcus and Alex Gardner to come and give a brief introduction to the Buddha Nature Project, and also take Rinpoche and the audience on a brief tour of the website. Marcus is the executive director of Tsadra Foundation and the main driver behind this project. He comes with a solid background in psychology, philosophy, and Buddhist studies. Alex is the director and chief editor of the Treasure of Lives, an online bibliographical encyclopedia, which most of you may know, and was the former writer for the Buddha Nature Project. He has completed his PhD in Buddhist Studies at University of Michigan and worked at Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation as executive director. He's the author of the recent book, The Life of Jamgun Kongtrul the Great. So over to you, Marcus.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Alex Zenkar Rinpoche and Karma Phuntsho, both, for your blessings and for being here on this special occasion. Before we start the tour, I just want to give a quick background on the project, and then I'll invite Alex Gardner, our first writer in digital residence, to say a few words about the project. So I hope you can all see the website clearly enough. You can put in the chat if you can't, let me know. The concept for this online resource comes actually from the mind of our founder, President Eric Columbell, who initially had us create an annotated bibliography for everything related to the Gyur Lama texts, otherwise known as the Ratnagotra Vibhaga or the Uttara Tantra, which expanded into third turning teachings more generally. And so I want to thank him for giving us this fascinating assignment and involving us in this project, and also for his long-term support. As with so many of our projects, Eric is very much involved and a driving force, always ensuring that our work exemplifies excellence in the field. While we all very much enjoy IT and web projects, Eric always reminds us that technology is not the end goal. It is just a tool we can use in the service of Dharma, and we should not be bogged down in development and design. So we're always working towards a balance of taking advantage of the latest technology, but not getting lost in it. The project was also influenced by His Holiness the Karmapa at the beginning, and Acharya Lama Tempa Gyaltsen, Ringu Tuku, and a host of other scholars and educators that we met with over the years, getting feedback and ideas. So I especially want to thank Professors Jose Cabazon, Douglas Duckworth, Jamie Hubbard, and Paul Swanson, and all of those who met with us at the AR in Denver in 2018. I also want to make special mention of the University of Vienna and Dr. Klaus-Dieter Mathis for hosting us in 2019. We held a symposium there, and you'll see on the website, you can view all of the presentations from that. So I want to thank all the scholars also and presenters from that special project. So, why Buddha nature? Why didn't we start a website about Dzogchen or the Four Ennobling Truths or emptiness? So I think that Buddha nature is the perfect concept for launching a new kind of educational resource for Buddhist studies because it can appeal to a wide range of people as a positive concept. But it's also one that introduces Buddhism in a way that connects it to the incredibly profound traditions. It's a concept that provides an entry into the entire world of Buddhist philosophy and hermeneutics. So on the surface, Buddha nature is a simple concept, but the philosophical debates that have raged over the centuries, especially in Tibet, show that there is quite a bit of complexity that touches on many of the major philosophical and doctrinal differences between the schools. So there's a lot to learn from this concept, which is simultaneously a supportive and positive entrance into Buddhist ideas. So as it became clear to the Foundation as a whole that digital resources would be an important part of our future and the future learning of people around the world, we began to explore how we might connect people to the materials that have been created for the study of Buddha nature. And that led us to consider the importance of multimedia and online learning in our times. We knew we wanted to find a way to engage audiences that increasingly showed less interest in reading and research in the classical sense and more in watching short videos and online research. So we began to explore the concept of user experience design and looked for ways to connect people to the more advanced content that we had been supporting the creation of for the past 20 years. We also wanted to create a hub for other people's work to support the field in a larger sense and collaborate with people and institutions. One of the online projects in the field of Tibetan studies that really takes advantage of quality web design as well as collaboration is the Treasury of Lives project. And so Alex Gardner was brought on to help us with our project. Alex, perhaps you can say a bit more now about the design and focus of the project at the beginning and how you see it.
Yeah. Sure. Yes, thanks, Marcus. And thank you, everyone. This has been a spectacular program so far. I'm really grateful to hear all your brilliant insights and be part of this. Let me just say, it was an incredible pleasure to work with the Tsadra team for 2 years on this site. And I'm grateful to have been invited to help with this work. I particularly appreciate Tsadra's dedication to both scholars and practitioners. To echo Lama Shenpen, we need both. So as we've been hearing, Buddha nature is a topic that cuts right to some of the core issues in Buddhism. Some of the most fascinating questions, like the nature of mind, the relationship between samsara and nirvana, between non-enlightenment and enlightenment, and whether those things are fundamentally different, two sides of the same coin, not to mention the relationship between study and practice, between wisdom and compassion. So Buddha nature is a core paradox. It can't possibly exist, and yet it has to. It's a brilliant topic around to gather a wide community of diverse views. So from the start, the idea of this website was to make a meeting place for all sorts of people interested in Buddhism, from the traditionally trained Geshe to academic scholars to the general reader, from the devout to the professional to the merely curious. As we've been hearing from our speakers, Buddhists have been wrestling with this paradox of Buddha nature for centuries, producing some of the most compelling and beautiful teachings as a result. And much of this material needs translating. So those not trained in traditional Tibetan scholarship can encounter it. Similarly, the Buddhist teachings are being explored, translated, analyzed in universities from Vienna, Leiden, Paris, London, Berkeley, Santa Barbara, Chicago, New York. Astonishing scholarship is coming out on the topic of Buddha nature. And a lot of this work is difficult to access. It's published in journals or expensive volumes, written in specialized vocabularies. So like the sutras and the shastras, they have to be translated in a way to reach a wide audience. So the mission of Buddha Nature, and we took this seriously from the start, is to include all the communities, everyone interested in Buddha Nature, everyone who's working on it. The Rongtong, the Shentong, the Geluk, the Nyingma, the Sakya, even the East Asian, the Ratnaguttara Vibhaga, the Vajrasamadhi, all these core texts and all the commentaries, put them all together with the scholarship on them and the beautiful Dharma teachings. The teachers like Lama Shenpen, who are engaging with this material and teaching practitioners, how do you do this now in the modern world? Can we get these people all together, all this material together, and put it in conversation? So no matter what your background, no matter what your affiliation, no matter what your training, no matter what the nature of your interest is, we can all learn from each other. So I think that this was the goal of the website, and I'm very proud. I think the team has done a spectacular job, and I think we've succeeded. I think it's beautiful, and so welcome all of you. We're very excited to have everyone explore the site and use it and share it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll do a quick tour of the website. I want to echo the thanks for the whole team. Really, it's been a pleasure to work with everyone. There's really been a lot of people that have worked on it over the years. Alex Gardner, but also Alex Catanese and Jeremy, Gwen, Mort, a whole team behind the scenes that you all can't see at the moment. But maybe we'll get to bring them on later and thank them for their hard work. Especially Jeremy, the design here that I think allows Alex Gardner to feel proud of this project is very much up to Jeremy, and so thank you very much again for that work. I'll just review this site quickly so I don't take up too much of your time. So on the main page you can see that we have 3 doorways. The first is for beginners. It's an area we designed especially to introduce people to the major concepts, questions, texts, history, and ideas about Buddha nature and about Buddhism in general. The next is where you would go deeper if you're already familiar with some of these things or want to see more of the depth of the website. You check out the Explore area. And the third is the deepest level on the website, where we present a detailed presentation of a root text in actually 5 different languages that you can study, and I'll show you that in a little bit. We also have on the main page a quick link to the site search, which lets you search all the content on the website, and the advanced search, which will allow you to search for more detailed metadata and information. And we also have a special link here to the portal for Tibetan readers, which gives you access to a lot of the videos, texts, and other articles with descriptions in Tibetan language. So we'll start quickly here with the Discover area. So this area was designed so that we can introduce concepts and ideas slowly with little bits of information. And it also introduces you to some of the navigation of the site and some of the functionalities. A few of the words that we wanted to highlight here: if you hover over a term, you'll get a definition, and you can click for more and learn much more about that term in different languages. There's video and connections to other content as you scroll down. You also get further connections to video, audio, articles, and so on. So we're really trying to connect to the multimedia aspect of the website. But here we also get the sort of pathway for beginners here through the questions, the history, texts, traditions, and people. And these are just little introductions to all of these things that should whet your appetite, and hopefully you'll want to explore more. And From here, you can go on to see a lot more of the depth of the website. So this is the kind of top layer or the beginning of this whole adventure. When we click on Explore, either from the main page or the bottom of the Discover area, we begin to see a different design, and we also begin to see a bit more about the complexity of the site. You're introduced to the main subjects, and these link to larger essays and more in-depth treatment of the people, history, ideas, topics, and questions surrounding Buddha nature. We also have a series of theme pages which collect all kinds of information about these themes, resources for students and teachers. We also have links for the library, which I'll show you in a moment, and of course the literature, which I'll show you also. Here's some featured content. You can see the entire symposium that we held last year in Vienna, and you can watch individual presentations. But this is much more than merely YouTube videos. We've also included tags and metadata about all of the terms, texts, historical people that the speakers mention, so that you can click on those names and learn more about them. And you can also find interviews, other kinds of information about projects we're working on, interviews on all kinds of topics, essays on the Ratnagotra Vibhaga and many other things, as well as some detailed videos and content from traditional sources. So one of the things I'd like to show you here at this moment is the root verses. So we spent a bit of time on this project, and you can reach this from the main page or from the Explore and other areas of the site. But this is one of the verses of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga as presented in the Tibetan tradition. This is verse 27 or 28, depending on the version you're looking at. And so for every verse in the entire text, we've done this kind of treatment where you can find the verse in multiple languages and have resources, scholarship in multiple languages, links out to the texts online, as well as commentaries in various languages that you can research and search through. All of this is in Unicode. We've also presented every translation from Obermiller's 1931 translation all the way up to much more recent online translations and published works. And for some of the verses, we've been able to gather commentaries from many of the masters throughout history, from Asanga, Sajjana, Ratnakara Shanti, all the way up to Mipam Rinpoche, Dzongzar Khyentse Rinpoche, Trangpa Rinpoche, and so on. So this particular verse is treated with some depth, as it is a very famous verse, but all of the verses have some of this information. And so I encourage you, if you're interested at that level of study, to take a look at it. The root verses page takes a moment to load. If you are surfing the web at the moment, you can take a look. But this page will allow you to see any of the verses individually. You can jump down to them. You can move, navigate through the chapters, and also you can toggle the 5 different languages and see English commentary, Tibetan, and so on. So thank you so much to Karl Brunnholzl for all of the translation work that went into this, and also Christian Charrier and Patrick Carre, who did all of the work on the French, which we borrowed for this website. So that's one of the offerings we have on the site. I'm just showing you some of the navigation features here. We also have more information if you're a Tibetan reader on this page, linked from the top and also the home page, which provides you with links to sutra sources for Buddha nature teachings, commentaries, video and audio from different teachers, and other resources. So that's a quick overview of the main parts of the website. The library is also a special space on the website. I just want to show you very briefly, this is a large and complex library, as it were, but there's a very simple way to filter it. You can search here for any kind of concept you want. Luminosity, for instance. You begin typing in the filter area, and it will bring up only those books, dissertations, articles, interviews, people, commentaries, and other materials that are related to that term. You can also search for people's names, such as Kazuo Kano, whose work is also foundational in terms of the study of Buddha nature in Tibet and India. So you can search for people's names, titles, topics, anything you wish here, translators' names. So this is one of the special offerings we have on the website. I encourage you to go take a look. I'm not going to go through all of the pieces that you can, or all of the areas on the website, because it would just take too much time, but you can actually click on each of the books or articles and see more information about the people that created it, see the texts. Here's just an example of a person page, Jamun Control. We have information linked to BDRC, Treasury of Lies, Himalayan art resources, and they're linked to all of the other materials that are related to them, both Tibetan texts and English works. We also have a series of information for Tibetan philosophers especially that we've recorded in terms of philosophical positions that these people hold. So please do take a look at that. I think this is really interesting. You can see the different areas of disagreement and debate all presented here. So I want to show also, just really briefly, something that Alex Gardner has been working very hard on for a long time at this point. We have built a large bibliographic web page, huge list of academic sources. Each of these is linked to pages with more information about the people and publications. We have over 500 academic sources, as well as multimedia sources, sutra sources, and commentarial sources, with full citations and links to websites and the content directly. So there's really a lot of content on here that you can see if you're a scholar or student that wants to explore that. There are other kinds of resources for those of you interested in Dharma teachings, and you can feel free to explore the website. If you ever find yourself lost, there's a site guide underneath the search that's always there in the top right, and this is a quick overview of everything that we have. And we also have added recently an Ask the Writer in Residence page where you can actually ask questions of Lopen Karma Phuntsho. So I encourage you to take advantage of that, although I hope you don't take advantage of his time too much. So thank you very much for that. That concludes the tour of the site. I hope you enjoy it. And I want to thank everyone again that's been involved with the creation of this site. It's really been a joy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, Alex. That was a very comprehensive tour of the website. But this tour is just to entice you to come and use it further. We're running over time, but I hope you'll forgive us. I think because of the technical glitches, we couldn't start exactly on time. We would like the panelists to respond to few questions. There aren't that many questions. Some questions I think are related to the website, and the answers can be found basically on the website. So if you don't mind, there is a question from Nim Dorji from Bhutan asking that Buddha nature is a lofty concept understood by enlightened beings and not easy to be understood by ordinary people. So how can one approach Buddha nature? I think Marcus has just given the 3 different levels of approaching Buddha nature. I would say, Nim, you should go to the Buddha nature website, start from discover, and then move on to explore and further. So in the interest of time, I think I will skip Nim's question. There's a question from Heidi Nevin asking, what role did Guru Rinpoche play in bringing teachings of Buddha nature to Tibet? Can I refer this question to Geshe-la?
That's I don't know, because it's the Buddha nature as particularly the language of Tathagata Garbha really came much more prominent in the second dissemination of Buddha Dharma. So really, it's difficult to say of the Buddha Tathagata Garbha teachings in Tibet and before the translation of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga text. And then, you know, with the Ngolotzawa and Zen couches. So I don't know. I mean, maybe one of the beautiful things about our time is that a lot more texts are being discovered that are old. And in the light of these textual discoveries, our historical understanding of the development of teachings like Buddha nature in Tibet probably will need to be modified. But at this point, I don't know of any Tathagata Garbha, very specifically focused Tathagata Garbha discourse before Ngoklon Sherap's translation of the Ratnagotra Vibhaga.
So, thank you very much, La. I may just chip in something here. There is definitely this text attributed to Guru Rinpoche called Mengaktawe Tengwa, the Ornament of Views, which deals with, one could say, Sugata Garbha or Buddha nature in the context of inner tantras, Mahayoga and Dzogchen and so forth. There's another question from P.K. Subedi asking, does Buddhism believe in Atma and Paramatma reunion? So I will pose that question to Karl. There is a section on the website discussing whether Buddha nature is self, and you will find response to that on the website, PK.
Well, I think, first of all, of course, it depends exactly what you mean by Atma and Paramatma, because even in Hinduism, there is many different definitions and opinions what that is. In general, as I said briefly, Buddhists are not that much into Atman, obviously. I mean, one of the key points of Buddhism is Anatman. But when you look at the Uttara Tantra, then itself, it uses the word self or Atman as one of the 4 paramitas, which means the great characteristics of Buddha nature, like ultimate Atman, ultimate self, ultimate purity, ultimate bliss, and ultimate permanence, which is, of course, at first glance, very antithetical to what we usually hear in Buddhism. Like, these are the 4 no-nos. But in a sense, you could say the Uttara Tantra turns this on its head. And there's many commentaries that explain very clearly that what that means is beyond any notion of self or no self, beyond any notion of Atman and no Atman, beyond any notion of permanence, impermanence, and all those kinds of things. So if you want to call that the ultimate Atman, which is neither Atman nor non-Atman, then from the Uttara Tantra point of view, you could say yes, but not in the sense in which it is usually described in like non-Buddhist schools.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gal. There's a question from Dorje saying that the field of artificial intelligence is developing fast, and it may affect how we learn about Buddhism in the future, and maybe about Buddha nature. Any thoughts on that is the question. Marcus, maybe you should respond to that.
I'm not sure if I'm qualified to answer anything about artificial intelligence. I think we're not quite as far as most people imagine we are with any of that. But Lama Shenpen Hookham, you mentioned that when you spoke. Perhaps you could say a few words.
Am I unmuted? Yes, what I find interesting about the whole discussion about artificial intelligence is that there's a sort of assumption that we know what intelligence is. And I think when you're looking at Tathagata Garbha, you're looking at Buddha nature, it's the same question: what is intelligence actually, and what counts as intelligent? And just perception or calculations or logical sequences of whatever it is isn't what we mean by intelligence. And I find this really interesting. That what does it mean to be a reasonable human being? You don't have to be logical to be a reasonable human being. An illogical person, a logical person could be a monster. So we don't actually mean, like a machine, or like a computer or artificial intelligence. And this whole idea, we're not there yet, but we're going to be able to create a mind. Well, we haven't even defined what a mind is yet. So that's why I think, these teachings, we could contribute to that, because it actually takes a whole different view of the nature of everything, actually, to arrive at what is the relationship between artificial intelligence and intelligence as we intuitively sense it to be. So yeah, it's a huge question. Really, really interesting.
Really interesting. Thank you. There's also a question about whether there's any Uttara Tantra study or scholarship in the Japanese tradition, either Zen or Shingon or any other Lotus Sutra traditions. Alex Gardner, maybe you want to answer that? Are you still there?
Yep, I'm here. So I am not an expert on East Asian Buddhism, but we did put a fair amount of East Asian Buddhism into the website, because yes, there's a massive amount of Buddha nature teachings in China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and East Asian traditions, and it's fascinating. The awakening of faith in the Mahayana, the Vajra Samadhi Sutra, which has been translated. There's spectacular resources. So you'll find it on the website. There's a couple of essays about these materials, and of course, some of the core koans in Japanese, in the Zen tradition. Does the dog have Buddha nature? So yes, that's a fascinating topic, and I encourage you to go further into it. The material is out there, and it's on the website.
Yes, and we also did an interview with Paul Swanson and Jamie Hubbard, who have studied the issue in Japan, in Japanese Buddhism, in depth. And we haven't put that up on the website yet, but we will put the recording up there. Thanks.
I think we will go for the last question, and it's from Christian Manzella. Could you comment more on preventing self-hatred through learning about self in contrast to luminous mind? So Lama Shenpen, if you can respond to that.
All right. So I didn't quite catch the question, because it was a matter of contrasting the self and the luminous mind, was it?
Yes, so could you comment more on preventing self-hatred through learning about self in contrast to luminous mind?
Yeah, so I wouldn't really contrast self and luminous mind. I would use so as another way of describing our true nature, and I would use our true nature as a way of talking about what we truly are, our true self or our true nature. I would use those synonymously. So when you when you have ideas about yourself that are actually deluded, then that's where you're not recognizing your true nature. And that the way, well, there's all sorts of interesting therapies now about looking at your what I would call your mandala, or your system, your world. So when you look at your world, you've got all these different characters in it that are all doing all different things. And one of them's doing this self-hatred thing against another part of yourself. And then there's an overarching, call it self if you like, but which doesn't change, which is always the same, which has this sort of inherent sanity to it that you can actually rediscover within yourself. And that is the kind of sanity you need in order to follow the path to awakening. So it's preliminary work that, or ongoing work really, and maybe it's a different way of talking about Mara, a different way of talking about the glaciers, just a more nuanced way of talking about the glaciers in a world where, especially when it's translated, the glaciers sound like something horrible and bad and make you bad in a culture where we're very, very sort of apt to feel that we're bad. And so translating the glaciers as defilements and negative emotions and so on actually feeds into this negative feeling about yourself. So finding a different way of talking about that in terms of parts or characters or something that are quite workable and that you can actually be in communication with rather than rejecting and trying to suppress, I think is a very healthy way of preparing yourself for the following the path of Dharma and continuing on it.
Thank you very much. There's one more question, and that will be the final question, and any of the panelists can respond. Does Buddha nature have a relationship with Sarvodaya Shramadana in Sri Lanka? Probably this is I'm not sure whether this is a reference to a Theravadan tradition or some other tradition. Sarvodaya Shramadana.
I'm not sure of that. I haven't heard of that. But Jinpa, you've done a lot of work with the mind and life and with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Maybe you want to say a few more things about any of that related to Buddha nature?
I mean, one of the things that Lama Shenpen brought out is that Buddha nature, while we acknowledge that historically the philosophical discourse on the part of Buddhism has been emphasizing the via negativa approach, because it's really all about letting go of the grasping. So there's a lot of emphasis on our delusory attributes of our mind and how that leads us down, a wrong path and all of this. So, but what the Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha literature does is to really emphasize, bring the balance of focusing now more on the positive attributes of the human mind and really point to the idea of the basic goodness, which in the Madhyamaka and other literature tends to be more in the kind of vague potential language, but the Tathagata Garbha literature really brings that out much more explicitly. So I think this understanding, and then this basic idea that Buddhahood is not to be sought from outside, it's really to be brought out from within. And those kind of approach really can be very helpful. And also, the idea, as Lama Shenpen was pointing out, which comes more from the Vajrayana tradition, where you have a different attitude, more nuanced attitude towards the kleshas, the afflictions, and really look at them as part of what make up your everyday experience of how the mind is experienced in your day-to-day life. And then finding, sort of, for example, the Vajrayana techniques of tapping into the energy that these emotions bring. And also the bliss experience plays a very important role, which tends to, in the non-Vajrayana teachings, tends to be tied more closely to development of attentional focus, where you cancel out all the distractions and then the mind becomes more attuned. Bliss comes as a byproduct of this. But in Vajrayana, the development of the bliss or bringing out the bliss is done through a completely different, method. So I think there is a lot of resource that would open up by the Buddha nature that really helps make some of the concepts and practices and language in the Vajrayana tradition, which is quite difficult to articulate in more secularized universal language. But I think this is one area where I feel there's a lot of resources that could be unlocked if we can use the Tathagata language and that whole approach in unpacking some of the more esoteric aspects of the Tibetan tradition, which is in Vajrayana, particularly the highest yoga tantra, this luminous nature of the mind and all of this. So, and so that's what makes the Buddha nature literature and you know, Gyalwa Karmapa's suggestion to look at it in a fresh, you know, framework is a really important, so that we don't get bogged down to the traditional kind of, you know, doxographical perspective of it belongs to this category or that class or this school or that school, you know, sort of bringing out how, you know, across all the Tibetan traditions, Buddha nature provides a unified approach to bridging the union of sutra and tantra, because all the traditions say we are Donga Sungdel, union of sutra and tantra. But how do you explain this Donga Sungdel? I think this is one area where the Tathagata Garba language and the literature can be really helpful.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. So Geshe-la, thank you. So I think with this, we'll close the question and answer session. Apologies once again, we had technical glitch and we ran over time, and I took the liberty to go on because I think it's so difficult, so rare to bring together such a group of experts, and the topic is so important that it justifies at least half an hour extra time. Now going forward, so what we have seen through Marcus's tour is a kind of a teaser to entice people to make further use of this online resource and learn more about Buddha nature. At the initial glance, it may look as if the resource is finished and the work is done. I had that impression when I first looked at it. However, having recently joined the team and closely studied the website, I could see clearly the enormous work that the team has done. Yet the website also revealed to me the many ways in which we can continually improve it to enhance the depth of its content, the breadth of its coverage, and the extent of its outreach. So going forward, firstly, we will continue to expand and enrich the online resource by adding new content and refining existing ones. We'll be adding glossary entries, writing short essays, some discursive long articles, translating texts, and creating audiovisual educational tools on Buddha nature. However, to do so, there's only so much a small team can manage. So we request the learned panelists here, the participants, the viewers, to share resources on Buddha nature that you know of, including texts, teachings, recordings, notes, or information on where we can find them. And once we have these materials, the team will curate and publish them as part of the online resource. Then secondly, to keep people engaged, we will also be sharing weekly quotes and topical or thematic essays and articles. Please share and spread the message among your circles using social media platforms or other channels. Then third, we hope to include more recordings and footage of study and practice of Buddha nature in the traditional Buddhist communities. So help us connect to relevant people and practices so that we can make or obtain such recordings. Then fourth, if the participants and the wider public think that a monthly online colloquium or symposium on Buddha nature would be beneficial, and if the experts and the scholars are willing to share their knowledge and experience, give us feedback, and we can launch such a series of educational events, a bit similar to what we have had today. Then finally, of course, it's our wish to see this seed of Buddha nature resource fully blossom, so that we can use the same tools and systems to develop similar resources for other topics, such as bodhicitta, emptiness, and thereby help take the literacy and the study of Buddhist topics to a much deeper level. So, in conclusion, the Ratnagota Vibraga, our codex, presents this analogy of how a pure and clean ground made of pearl would reflect the celestial king Indra with his mansion, retinue, and wealth, and how such a site of mere reflection would inspire people on earth to live righteous lives, to be reborn in Indra's world. In a similar fashion, it's our modest hope that this online resource will serve as a ground to reflect the noble qualities of the Buddha and the principles of enlightenment, and thereby inspire many people to seek them. So with that, I would like to thank the panelists for taking time and joining us. We are really in debt to you for giving your time. Some of you must have woken up very early. We know Rinpoche is now nearing midnight in Hong Kong. So we have done this in a very timeless way, transcending our normal restrictions or strictures of time. So thank you all very much. And also thank you, the audience and the viewers, both on Zoom and Facebook. Do please remain engaged in this project. And to auspiciously conclude the session, Rinpoche, who, as I said earlier, is a very elusive person. It's very difficult to get him. And this time, after some persuasion, he agreed, and he enthusiastically wanted to share 2 prayers that are really dear to him and that are appropriate for the event. So we will conclude with some prayers led by Rinpoche, and I'll again try to bring him back on our WeChat call. Thank you very, very much. So we'll start the prayers when Rinpoche comes back on.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karma Phuntsho, for hosting. And I want to say thanks also to the team behind the scenes there, Jeremy, Gwen, Mort, Alex is back there, Darren, the other Alex as well. Thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists.
Rinpoche, 생기돼. 나서 다 Rinpoche 숭에 숭 안에 덤바디 돼 Rinpoche.
당내 식용료직 주기 근데 다디 민마를 쇼데 걸을 근데 다지 되게 달라 그를 못 채다 근데 다 이힘 소리야 근데 음악자 근데 노신 미로잖아 와서 가서 육갑라 근데 다딱 얘기 근데 같이 같이 뭐 라마 교가 그래서 말만 제발 니 거라 근데다 송아 아창봉 보여 여자 뒤에서 함께 근데 그런 것이 나 콩나다가 지술 드니다 세대고 그리고 근데 근데 바로 헤비값 대줘요 때 삶이 지에서 아니 이마 야 때서 정말 망보를 됩니다 삶이 사소 되는 때서요 대조 삼지 됩니다 때라내지 소 담지 로르기 아자 망보요 대조 담지 딱 견나빠가 빅나 아니 다시 기급 대조 콜라 가지 됩니다 송도 함께 시사됩니다 야본 챙겨리 다딩이 다리 유튜브 계좌가 됩니다 아마 대수인 단식인 선생님이 됩니다 아니 잔다 소바지 다리 던리 됩니다 즉 너게 나 된다 냠송 듣게 사들 대고산 교아레티 됩니다 잔다 소바다 즉 되니 사업하스 되니 햄버 되니다 분소와 공기양 되니다 양아 냠송 사들 되니 둑막식데 되니다 즉 내가 인식민이게 되니다 즉 선비 꼴레고 즉 되니다 다 공화 이렇게 그 설득 되니다 다리 인식민이게 되니다 공화 될라 되니 이 잔라 소파 지지기다 Dani, Embo, Karma Phuntsho, yang Tapan, Dani, Dendi, ngaku Tsadra Foundation nang Dani da Eric, Columber down, Dani da Andrea, Mona da Kamje, okay, Darin dana, Milserki, Dani da Nala, si Kofia, Dani. Miss Dani that got the website, then I read the link, then back, and this is out there. And it finally got the getting TV, and when it's on it, then it has no Mongol pencil, you won't have it. Then it in the dark was it will come to teach you get it. Then it carried the Nita. Big standard girl on the Nita. Come Mongol in the front and the night, then it was quite the university. Hungry, the Nita. Carried the Nita. Mongol then it is that is something that needs to add sanity and back in me. That didn't pull that. Then it for them.
So I will briefly interpret what Rinpoche has just shared. Rinpoche said that in the days of Guru Rinpoche, Ishisogel and Bimala Metra, there has been quite a bit of discussion and study and work on Buddha nature. And these were later revealed in the forms of Dharma treasures. So he wants to highlight that in the context of our study and discussion on Buddha nature. And then Rinpoche said he's an old, humble man who is now after solitude and quietude, but Tsadra and I have persisted with our invitation for him to join this gathering. And he's extremely grateful for the invitation. He wants to extend his special gratitude to Tsadra founder, Eric Columble and Andrea, and then also the executive director of Tsadra, and the team who has created this wonderful web resource. So he would like to extend immense heartfelt gratitude for making such wonderful resource available. And now we will start the concluding prayers. So Rinpoche dine di moment di sunam rol nganzo nyamdu din chan rol. Las. Sunam di tamche ziba ni tomne nyebe janam pamje kega naji balayim chupa sibe sole. Then so Rinpoche di zigido ele Rinpoche nanju zokshin melamde that's all that's all
감당 힘이 가다가 근데 누가 힘이 나가 그것도 마음 우리 공주 또 비시 공부 해주 친다 남기 때나 공주 메타 얘네 나비 기다리 능력에 랑무리 공기 습리 돈 that's maybe could be dropa that ramshin umshu ubral jini ram 남기 달라 건축 메타고 상난 남독 초스 마홍신 당병 동마 땡드 남기엠바 한 불 리메 한자인 은접성 뻥랑 예set ramamshin 용신아 남기 달라 건축 메타고 복미 일수 남카자비랑 진능 리바 카라 은등신 실세 희바 랑도 조한데 해취 주대를 돈으로 복귀고 리위 yarbo sensa dindas yene rangri chundur sambola 혹시 젠도 하다 인수yan 자수 분리 독바 진리 잉리 군도 상무 화공초 리위 yarbo sensa din발 라우드 명이 오만 친구 돈 아무튼 근경 상계 제고 하루 공연 독과 진료 사람 연대 실속 수준 리우 예루 회사 승발
라소르 모세 되네 간주 디냠도 된사긴 모세다 Namo Guru Kelman Gone Yojo Pambe Do Sheme Zulban Dangshin Dembe Chuje Mingae Sudan Dembe Tuba Danson Chembo La Dani Dene Tidan Tsera Jewa Sije Gedan Mide Jewa Sije Kugi Jezone Jewa Sije Kishen Dubai Nije Sije Mebra Duwa Dai Ngatsi Zundai Mebra Dembai Semje Yojo Mebra Dawai Chuden Rodai Shingen Dembrai Tarbe Lamlai Dambo Jube Goy Korwe Nene Dambo Jube Nyamlen Jenaim Kingi Dambe Goy Chime Nyejon Julai Kevrai Yenai Sangye Jubla Desho Je Mena Sangye Jubla Tavcha Sangye Jube Sabe Mano Namda Janjoy Semjoy Kevrai Kone Gondo Janjoy Semjoy Be Serai Gundo Janjoy Semhej Yanda Yando Jancho Semgo Ne Jancho Sembe Chela Juhai Tubai Shodan Jampe Pao Dan Gundo Zambe Chuba Ganyen Age Tserai Chigen de Dawai Jurne Dunye Jebai Linjoy. Seji Sange Juve Lamzan Jen Duji Dunye Juve Tage Boy Suji Korde Erme Dawaye Lamju Doji Tebrai Jubrai. Namde Lamguan Doji Zimbe So Kunlai De Tuan Gibe Joge Jen Lenje Geba Tsimbe Gorjo Lamje Kandre Lindo Jubrai. Chema Pambe Simye Nyume Je Chema Mimba Rango Jembra Don Chele Jeve Nyamsha Junjante Cheme Denge Devo Tobrash Neka Suya Sambe Dengendu Sembe Tsenae Sambaye Nyempai Chiwe Tsenae Niche Dunge Me Shine Chunai Jiban Dato Tedan Denre Joai Ki Nijong Jancho Semda Lenche Jitra Riba Jijin Jigen Nyurdo Zobe Sange Tovarai Sange Nimae Tsembe Jedonji Damche Nimae Ninge Dusre Gide Gide Nimae Tarbe Dojo Ne Chosum Nime Yedai Mide Cheze Diae Nide Kikrosh Chogi Tadro Gundo Dajo Ode Bemo Rabdo Geje Sangi Temba Darshin Janjo Senjo Rinpoche Je Mage Banam Mage Kevai May the precious and supreme bodhicitta arise in those in whom it has not yet arisen, and where it has arisen, may it not decrease, but ever increase more and more. Thank you. Thank you very much.